Students of Reddit. What was the reason for why one of your teachers had a breakdown during class? My math professor in college was going through a divorce and they were fighting for custody of their 2 younger children. You can tell he was irritated because he wore his emotions on his sleeve. One day he came into class about 5 minutes late and he was physically shaking. He was violently crying and apologized to us and said the class was cancelled. He apparently lost the custody fight with his ex-wife. Had something similar. My math teacher, around 2006-ish, was going through a divorce. We all got the impression it has thrown her deep into some kind of depression. She was absent a lot and sometimes just gave us a paper with math problems to solve while sitting lethargically at her desk. One time she totally broke down in front of us. She just randomly told us that she saw one of these "Have you seen this cat?" flyers pinned to a tree and called the owners to ask how it is to own a cat. The owners felt ridiculed and allegedly shouted something. She sobbed while repeating, "I just wanted to know how it is to have a cat." Man. I felt so bad for her. Physics teacher came into class late. Walked past the podium and walked into the chalkboard. Like. He would have kept walking if it wasn't there. He then picked up one of those plastic pen things that you put chalk in. Proceeded to try and write on the chalkboard even though the pen was empty of chalk. All the while mumbling incoherently. Found out later he had a stroke and managed to drive himself to the university. I had a similar experience in college with a history teacher. But at the time at least it looked like he was just wasted. I still think this was probably the case, but several people did check to see if he was okay. I still remember him slurring the Malays of Wilhelmian Germany repeatedly. Everybody just gave up and left after a while. Christ. Wow. A reftard said he'd piss on the teacher's grandpa's grave. He had died 2 days earlier. Wow. That's horrible. What an a-hole. My JH biology teacher legit used to have weird flashbacks of when he fought at Vietnam. She was pretty sad to see. We had a substitute teacher that would make all students in the class pop open their metal binder rings in unison. Otherwise, the sound of multiple binders rings opening at different times would remind of him artillery sounds. I had JH math teacher like that. I thought it was just a rumor. One day he was sitting at his desk towards the end of class and he just got this dazed look. Suddenly starts yelling weird things at us and we all got super quiet. There were rumors he had thrown things during these episodes, but I never saw it. She was a substitute teacher at elementary school. And at some point a kid took it too far and threw a bottle at her. It was an empty plastic bottle. But still. Poor teacher. Sometimes it's not the physical things that hurt you. We'll call him MR. Jiggles. Of course. That's not his real name. It's not anyone's real name. But it's fitting enough. As he was a rather large fella. A nice man all the same. Just rotund. Now. I heard he was on PCP. I heard he was infected by devils. I heard all manner of rumors. But from the mouth of MR. Jiggles. None of that was true. See, one day in the middle of class he just stopped giving a lecture and somehow became stricken with the idea that he was Jesus. I'm actually not making this up. It does sound like bullsh. Even writing this. But I assure you it happened. 1998 was the year. To be exact. He left the classroom and stood in the hallway waiting for class change and then picked students to bless. He'd walk up. Bless a student. And then walk away. All the while preaching loudly that he was the coming of Christ. I'm not sure if it was a second coming in his mind. Who knows? Maybe it was the first. That was unclear. But one of the students wasn't receptive to his blessing and swatted at MR. Jiggles' hand. Mistake. MR. Jiggles grabbed him by the throat and dogged him down the hallway, promising to personally carry him into hell. He actually just carried him into a biology teacher's classroom. She tried to talk him down. But it wasn't working. The police and EMS arrived quickly enough. No one was hurt. Now. I think everyone assumed MR. Jiggles was fired. But the next year he was back. Everyone had a version of the story and a theory for why it happened. Some say his wife was cheating on him. Others said it was some dog's induced psychosis. But one day at lunch we were talking about something unrelated and I just asked him point blank what happened. The answer? He was on some kind of psych meds. Had run out. And forgot to refill them before hitting empty. His pharmacy was out of that particular medicine. Told him it would be 5 days before they got it in. And he thought he'd be fine for that 5 days. He was mistaken. My 8th grade Spanish teacher and the freshman baseball coach were having an affair. It eventually became public knowledge and she had several breakdowns as her divorce played out over course of my 8th grade year. I had the pleasure of joining the freshman baseball team the next year and experiencing his own share of breakdowns from his own divorce. Who snitched? I can provide a more positive breakdown from years ago. English teacher realized 5 minutes into the discussion of a book that only a few people had done the assigned reading and he put his book on a table and went on a tear about how you can't just go through life assuming that other people will pick up your slack. And that it's important to value your education and not just bullshit your way through classes. I could tell he was disappointed in the class and several students were embarrassed for not putting in a little bit of effort to read a effing book. This happened in my senior English class when we were supposed to read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. 3 of us actually read and I was glad that I was one of them. I would have been pissed too. My teacher really cared about the class and it was first semester and a lot of those kids were taking it and barely staying afloat because they wanted to graduate early. It was the last credit they needed. There was this science teacher already on the verge of a breakdown. We called her Molecule. Someone wrote that on leaf of one of the plants in the class and she started crying and pretty much had a breakdown. Not my teacher but my younger sisters at the time. The class was making fun of her recent miscarriage and her mum dying of cancer. Yes, teenagers are cruel. Jesus, what the F? I mean, I know some of us are a-holes but like the entire class? Who raised those rancid human beings? Middle school can have since absolute scum. I feel legitimately bad about causing this one. Junior year of high school. My lit teacher was from Wisconsin. And had a very thick Midwestern accent. This was in the South. So a number of her intonations were very noticeable. In particular, words with an ag syllable stuck out. Egg. Bag would be pronounced like a mixture of bay and egg. She was reading a passage from Beowulf to the class one day. And to paraphrase the modern English translation, came across the following sentence. Beowulf killed the dragon with the dagger. It was too many Midwestern syllables too close together for my friend and I to handle tactfully in our 16-year-old mindsets. And involuntarily, we laughed. Upon attempting to cover it up. It probably sounded more like a snicker. And she did not take it well. I wish I could say that she scolded us. But it was so much worse than that. She shut the book. Looked at the floor and straight up cried for what must have been 45 seconds. But felt like an entire 45 minutes. Dejected. Breathless sobs. Once she had recovered from this, she picked it back up where she left off. Like it hadn't happened. Even though, generally speaking, I really disliked that teacher. It sucked knowing that our immature reaction caused her to feel ridiculed. We didn't have malicious intent. But the result was the same. And we of course apologized to her privately after the fact. This sounds like there was something else going on with her and this was just the straw that broke the camel's back. The 9th of November 2003. We were in first period and we had a moment of silence in remembrance at the time that the first plane hit the tower. I think it was a Channel 1 thing. The teacher broke down. She was panting, pulling her hair, and began mumbling to herself. The mumbling became louder and she started to pace. Finally she walked over to a coffee pot that was in the room and picked up a large Ziploc bag of ground coffee. While screaming, "I wish this was Coke. I need it right now." She then fell against the wall and slid down. We let her go for a minute or two before a few of my friends and I went over and helped her up and walked her to the front office. We got the best long-term sub ever after that. A true influence I'd only seen a few times in all of my schooling. Mine was on 9/11 itself. First plane hit. We hear the news. And the classroom TV gets turned on. Very young algebra teacher bursts into tears and runs out of the room to who knows where. Leaving 30 12-year-olds wondering WTF. Turns out she had a sister who lived in NY. state. Not even the city. Honestly remember being more scared by her reaction and abandoning the class than the planes hitting the towers. One time in math class the emo girl was not having it. I don't even remember how it got started, but she ended up bickering with the teacher and the emo girl called the teacher Thunder TTS. It was at this point that the emo girl was sent to the office and the teacher had to take a seat at her desk in the back for a few minutes, resting her Thunder TTS on the desk. Some guy came in late and started talking to his friends. The teacher chimed in with something like, "If you're gonna be late, you might as well not show up at all." So he said fine. B and left. She stared blankly at the door for a good 30 seconds. And then yelled at everyone else in the class for what one, now absent, student did. I distinctly remember her claiming at one point that everyone in this room is failing this class. Was your classmate Lil Pump? My ed teacher spent 15 minutes trying to figure out how to turn the volume up for a video. An ed teacher, mind you, someone who teaches in technology, didn't know how to turn the volume up. When she finally figured it out, the whole class applauded and she broke down and left the room. Admittedly, this makes us students look bad. But she was an awful teacher who clearly had no clue about anything in the subject. We didn't like her, so we let her figure it out herself. Reading through these comments, I will never understand how some kids can be such pricks. They are at an age where they're clever enough to know what buttons to push to set people off. But they haven't had the social experience to form the empathy to know why they shouldn't push those buttons. Middle school in particular can be turbulent in that regard because they are also dealing with hormones. Drives. More rigid social circles begin to form and they'll find themselves getting excluded from circles they were once a part of. And by high school people start asking existential life questions like, what do you want to do when you graduate? Top that off with specific kids who are facing family issues, dog problems at a young age, or any form of abuse in other areas of their lives. And they begin to lash out at others who don't deserve it because they don't know what to do to fix their situation. Obviously some kids are more well adjusted than others. But it can be very difficult for some people that age to learn how to act. Not that that's an excuse, but it's an explanation at least.